Good afternoon, everyone. This is Kenyon Gleason, president of NASGW. Want to welcome you to today's webinar. Thanks so much for being on the call with us today. Our presenters today from Growth Strategy Partners are Chris DeCenzo and George Harris. These two guys have an incredible amount of experience in this industry and have some great information to share with you today. The call today will be about an hour. There'll be plenty of time for Q&A for you as you go through the presentation. There's a chat window on the right side of the screen there. If you have questions as you go along and you want to type them in, you can do that. There'll be an opportunity for you to ask and get some further insight if you need it. Also, today's session is being recorded. As we do with all of our webinars that NASGW sponsors, we record them and then they're placed on our website under the resources tab. So if you hear it today and you've got somebody that you want to share it with, or somebody in your office you think could benefit from the content of today's webinar, please direct them to our website. It'll be up there. I think it usually takes only about a day or so to get up there, so it should be ready by early next week, so you can go ahead and grab the recorded version of it. We've got a good group on the call today, so thank you all for being a part of the call. Certainly appreciate it. I know the market is a little unusual right now, and so maybe that's driving some of your participation as we try to find ways to sell more and make more money and get more efficient. So I know Chris and George have a lot of great operational things they can share with you today for your planning and sales initiatives. So looking forward to hearing what they have to say. One other quick note for future reference, you might not remember this next time, but just want to make sure I tell you, when you register on the NASGW site, you have to kind of re-register again once you get through the NASGW site and we confirm you're a member. Then there's another click you have to take to actually register for the GoToMeeting or GoToWebinar link. So just be mindful of that. I think some of you got some notes from us today about that. So not a big deal, but just wanted to make sure I mentioned that to you. And then for those of you that don't know, or maybe you're starting to think about it at least, October seems like a long way away, but it's not. We are very active and working very hard right now to put together another great annual meeting and expo for NASGW. That show is the 17th through the 20th of October this year. We're adding a couple of new things. We're going to have a range day this year. We're going to also have some expanded award opportunities. You'll be hearing a lot of information about those things here in the coming days. Also going to redo our Expo exclusives program. So for those of you that have some product you want to offer an exclusive to wholesalers, we're going to provide that opportunity again this year. It was super successful last year, and we're hoping to expand that initiative this year. So lots and lots of stuff going on at NASGW, despite the fact that it's kind of that summer slowdown, and certainly we've seen a market slow down in many areas this year, but definitely looking forward to a good show, and hopefully things will have picked back up by then. But I'll go ahead and turn it over now to Chris and George as they can fill you in on some of the great material they have today. Again, thank you for being with us. If you ever need anything, feel free to give us a call at the office, and I hope you have a great summer. Chris, it's all yours.
Kenyon, thanks very much. We've actually already made our hotel reservations for the meeting, so we'll be there.
Good to hear. If you haven't, you're gonna have to go online and find a different place. The headquarters hotel is sold out. So.
All right. Welcome everybody. Chris DeCenzo here. We're going to talk about sales and operations planning, how to increase fill rates and reduce costs. NASGW actually took a survey, or maybe late last year, early this year, on what topics you wanted to hear, and this was one of the top ones. Not surprising, because it's something I honestly know that this industry is challenged with. Many industries are challenged with it, but we've got those spikes and we've got those issues, and that really causes some concern on how do you balance supply and demand. So today we're going to talk, this is going to be an intro session. We've got an hour, but we can't get too deep into sales and operations planning because it's pretty complicated, but we will give you an overview, and if you want to hear a round two or more detailed, we can do that. Again, if you have questions throughout the session, there's a questions box in your window there on the right. Put that in there. Give you a little sense of who's listening in today, attendee-wise. We've got an equal mix. Actually, it's interesting. We have an equal mix of sales and marketing professionals, presidents, executive VPs, and then people in operations. And then a smaller group specifically in the purchasing and buying area and in finance. So it's a big mix today, and I'm sure if we were in a room, we'd have a big drag out war on how this works. The other piece, we've got about 70% manufacturing and about 30% distributors. So let's get in. So let's talk about specifically, like, what's the issue here? What are we dealing with? The issue is sales and operations just don't get along. Okay, maybe not completely like that, but we do have this battle between sales and operations and not being aligned and not philosophically necessarily agreeing what should be done and when. Now, I want to emphasize, yes, we have spikes in our industry and unexpected demand for different reasons, but that's not really the point of today. This is about, and sales and operations planning can help you along those lines, but it's really about balancing supply and demand and making your business that much more efficient. And based on our experience working with many organizations in this industry, they don't do this very, very well. So very happy to hear everybody here today, and hopefully there'll be some changes you'll make in your business when we're done. Let's talk a little about who you're going to listen to today. You've got myself, the good-looking guy on the left, and George. I think the thing to take away from me, worked in industry, worked with Ruger, been shooting for 30-something years. You can see competitive hunter and stuff like that. But I'm an engineer at heart, and that means I focus on building efficient organization, efficient processes, and things that work very, very well. And sales and operations planning is a tool for that. And we've had a lot of experience implementing it and having some great, great results from clients. So hopefully what I'll be able to do with you today is share some of those learnings and help you do this in your business. George, you there?
I am here. Basically, I'm a gun guy, period, end of statement. And I've dedicated my whole life to it and am fully immersed in it. If you don't recognize the name, if you take a look at Shooting Illustrated, American Hunter, or Concealed Carry magazine, you'll see columns monthly that I throw into the mix. I also do expert advice to attorneys in legal cases, do industry training, internal as well as external, and product development. Love to throw my 2 cents in on helping people build proper products for the consumer so that when they put these things on the market, they make sense to the consumer, and the consumer picks these things up and uses them right away. So our expertise, both Chris and mine, over the 70 years total that we've got together is valuable for a lot of people that don't have that experience. You know, we've kind of been there and done that. So that's our value to the whole operation.
Yeah, you should also clarify you're a good gun guy, not just a gun guy, but you're a good gun guy, right?
Well, some people think so. Depends on which side of the bench we're on in the courtroom. But
that is true. That is true.
All right, moving along.
So what we do, George and I, and the team that we have here, is really try to, we talk about accelerating, the revenues, the profit, and the talent within an organization, specifically outdoor sports. Firearms is a big niche of ours. You can see some of the clients we've worked with there. I know some of them are actually on the call today. What we do, though, back to the engineer pieces, we've identified what drives long-term growth, which we call these 7 keys you're seeing here, and take that research with our tools and methodologies, sales and operations planning being one of those tools, and the experience of our consultants like George, we can implement and get your results faster than you can. When we talk about sales and operations planning today, we're actually going to hit upon the topic of growth planning. We're going to hit upon customer management. We're going to hit upon robust processes and ability to execute. So it kind of crosses a whole bunch of some of the things that we focus on. What we're going to do is talk about first, what is sales and operations planning, S&OP? What are the benefits? How do you do it? What are the keys to success? And then how would you get started? So again, as we go through this, if you have questions along the way, please ask them. jump right in. Let's talk about what is sales and operations planning. Now you see a definition here. The words that I want to emphasize are integration or integrated, alignment, synchronization, and then all functions of the organization. So it's an integrated planning tool. In fact, it's nothing new. As a older engineer and someone that's done a lot of change management in businesses, and you come in the consulting world, consultants are classic for creating these new terms. It's not a new term. We're talking about integrating sales and operations, all right? And they create a process around it. So it's nothing new. It's not this esoteric thing. It's taking practices that we've done in the past and putting them together. But the key here is the synchronization of it. In fact, there's a little graphic that we borrowed. One of the things that we like to do is not make up new stuff if there's good stuff out there. So this is kind of a framework for sales and operations planning. Why I like this graphic is it talks about on the right side, your client or customer. You've got the supplier on the left side. You've got the financial planning component to this on the bottom, and then boxed in by strategic planning on the top. And it is kind of that boxed in approach or a good framework to outline sales and operations planning. We're basically taking a balancing act between what the customer would like on the right side with what we can get from our suppliers on the left side, with some balance between the strategic planning, what are we trying to do for a business, and the financial restraints or constraints that we have. Okay, and then we'll get into a little more of this today, but that's the framework we're going to use today. In fact, what I want to do to understand the audience a little better is take a poll. And you should see a poll coming up asking you, how would you rate the sophistication of your sales and operations planning? And what I'd like you to do is just click on one of the bullets. Do you think you have a very high, a robust process? Is it high, very high, high, average, low, and very low? And you can kind of read what definition we have in there, but trying to understand who's listening and what's your level of sophistication. You're trying to get better, you're just trying to start and figure this thing out. You get a whole bunch of voting, again, maybe like 10, 15 more seconds, and then I'm going to close it up. We'll share it with you. And you can see who's on the call, and we can try to gauge, or adjust this presentation as best we can according to who's on here. So let me do this. I'm going to close this up because we've got a whole bunch of them, over 80% completed. So I'm going to close this thing up, and I'm going to share it. And everyone should be seeing that now. And what you should see, George, you see it?
Yep, I see it.
Most are, except for the very low, that then no, we're not doing it. It's low, then average, then high, right? People look like they're here looking to learn and trying to figure this out. Is that what I'm saying?
Good way to be. Yep, that's a good way to be.
Okay, so a lot of new people here. That's great. And I did see a question come through, but I'm going to have to get to that in a second. So let's go through and talk a little bit about sales and operations planning. Okay, so how does it help us? Let's talk about how does this help us. In fact, George, so, in fact, Kenyon talked about when he started off about, I don't know if he used the word craziness, whatever it was, but how would you describe, let's say, the history here in our industry about supply or demand, if you will? How would you describe demand?
What drives demand? World events, you've got war and terrorism all over the place. You've got domestic events. You've still got terrorism. You got gangs. You got drugs. That applies to personal protection type stuff. Local or regional events, crime, drugs, gangs, terrorism, and all that kind of good stuff. And then, of course, you've got the media and the news reports that fan the flames and get everybody all excited. But the other side of that is the gun media, and what is that doing? If we're making hunting type firearms, or we're making competitive type firearms, or ammunition or accessories, or these types of things, people read either in the online blogs or in the magazines and that kind of stuff, and that kind of drives what people want. And you've got new products that come out for competition hunting. I like to use the term just in case. I think there's probably more just-in-case buying than anything else, and it responds directly to what people perceive the condition of the world is, or the political direction the country is going in, or that kind of stuff. And with all that said, each company needs to stay informed in the area or the lane that they're working in. They have to rely on experts in some cases, like you and I, or other types of people in the field, to keep them guided in the right direction. And they have every right to ask, well, why do you think this? And we should be able to give them some pertinent data to back up, pointing them in that direction. So that's
data is helpful, right?
Oh,
yeah.
Absolutely. You got to always ask why.
If we have an industry, and we can talk about, I'll talk about the large supply chain, which is from the consumer to the dealer, to the distributor, to the manufacturer, to the manufacturer's suppliers. That's the whole big one. We're really just trying to talk within the walls, if you will, now of the distributor or manufacturer. And even within those walls, there's uncertainty. I mean, what's demand going to look like? Yeah, we chase NICs. People debate NICs. We've got a question actually here that I'll ask, but it talks about, I'm in sales and I produce a forecast, but production doesn't make to a forecast. So why am I making a forecast if production doesn't make to it? And that gets into the uncertainty and the disbelief. And I think we're in a situation, not just in our industry, we see it in others, but where it's unsure what the future looks like, and therefore people have a lot of questions. They don't, I'd say, build a process to make it work. And maybe the point is, without getting too much into this, is that that's what sales and operations planning can do. Sales and operations planning can do that. Well, you got to look at trends, the historical trends, and then you pull out your crystal ball, or be a little more future-oriented. But we're in a situation where, there's a lot of uncertainty in our industry in a general sense, let alone political inputs or, violence and other things that go on in the United States and the world. So I guess the point here is that sales and operations planning is a tool that can really help us, specifically in our industry, but in others. In fact, I'll talk about some of the benefits that it provides to you. Again, some information here from the Hackett Group. It shows, just think about it. Here's a tool that can increase sales on the left side, reduce costs, and reduce working capital. It's a win-win for everything. We've got some examples here where order fill rates have gone up 54%. Forecast accuracy has gone up 70%. Inventory turns have gone up 52%. So my question, and people listening, so we've got an audience, George, right, that is new to this. They haven't got into it. And I'm going to pull out my engineering thing, but why would you do something unless there's a benefit? There's a real strong ROI, return on investment, on implementing this process. In fact, I'll ask the attendees, geez, if you were to get 2 to 4% of sales increase, or 5 to 10% reduction in material cost or freight and productivity improvements, your working capital was dropped 20, 30%. These are just average numbers. What would the impact on your business be? How much would that benefit your business? Because that's the benefits that we're talking about here. So without belaboring that, how do you do this? How do you get these benefits? Well, it starts with building a swing set. Now, this is something I was trying to find a graphic that talked about people being on the same page. And I saw this one, I liked it, because it talks about what the customer asks for, everything that gets messed up in between, and what the customer actually needed at the end. How do you start with sales and operations planning? It starts with a philosophical and cultural understanding of what are we trying to accomplish here. When we look at making change, there's what I call the technical side, which is the process, the tools, the techniques. Then you got the organizational side, which is, does the people understand and buy in and agree we need to be doing this and that this makes sense. And, you know, almost to that question I got earlier here already about, you know, we're not on the same page. Sales and operations don't necessarily agree, and I don't say we're fighting, but we don't understand what we're trying to accomplish. There's poor communication, there's poor alignment and tools, but honestly, it starts with getting on the same page to agree upon what we want to do for a business and not looking at that function. And that's, I think, where we get caught. So how are we going to do this? We're going to start with strategy at the top. So I'm going to use that framework that I showed you a little earlier, circled strategy. We need to talk first about your operating model, okay? So the point here is we're trying to be more efficient. We're trying to balance and integrate the supply side and the demand side. But the real question is, how are you running your business? What's what I call the operating model? So I got a little matrix here, you know, volume and customization. Are you a high volume business that has very little customization, just crank these things out, low cost producer? Or are you creating more customized product, make to order rather than make to stock? Or really the question is, where are you on that mix? What's the mix level? And you need to have that understood, because you're going to start getting some debates down the road from operations about, well, you know, is it going to increase the cost on this if you want me to keep changing, you know, over machines all the time to make different products? And then sales is going to go, well, it costs you too much money, so therefore, you know, to do this, so I can't sell it for that price, and you get these battles. So you have to start with understanding how, you know, I call it how you play in the game. What's your operating model? And then a big piece of this is service levels. And here's, you know, I guess one of my pet peeves. Again, you'll hear the engineer coming through, but when it comes to inventory and when it comes to safety stock, that's a mathematical calculation based on service levels, meaning what percentage of the time do you want to have a product in stock that you can deliver to your customer? And with most of the organizations that we've worked with, they haven't defined that. And if you can't define that, you can't actually define how much inventory you should have, you know, at the SKU level. And what people don't understand, maybe some do, but if you want to, when you talk about service levels, the higher the percentage you want of service level, is a little chart. It is a hockey stick. It's that hockey stick, and as you get from 80 to 85 to 90, 95% of the time, you'll see on the vertical axis, your safety stock skyrockets. And, you know, I think most of us would probably agree. I was talking to a client last week, and they had the same conversation about inventory that most companies do. We've got too little of X and too much of Y. And there's a whole bunch of things in the middle. And that's typically because we don't see service levels being defined and inventory being managed. So we're talking about, you know, how to do this. I would say if you do not have service levels defined at the SKU level, you're going to have a hard time doing this. So next piece. After you start talking about the philosophy, if you will, and the organizational buy-in and alignment, now start getting into the details of how this should work. So on the right side, you know, you got to start with that sales forecast. But it's not just sales building it, it's operations and finance challenging it. Well, why this? Why that? What are the assumptions that you have around where this demand is going to come from? Why do you think these SKUs? Hey, we can all talk about, you know, the demand for pocket pistols and self-defense handguns and black AR, MSR rifles. But when you start breaking that down, is that where's that demand coming from? Then let's look at the production scheduling side. I mean, these are two things most organizations should be doing now, which is having a sales forecast and a production schedule. It's the integration of these two, which is in the middle here, that is probably what's missing. So put that sales forecast together and then balance it up with the production schedule based on service level goals, because that's what's going to drive a lot of the inventory, which is going to drive all your costs. Okay, so as a starting point, that's where you need to get going. Now, somewhat back to this question, I'll get something to George here. In fact, I think the question, it's actually a statement and a question, and I'll ask this to George, but it says, I'm asked to produce a forecast, and then manufacturing is reluctant to produce to it. So if you don't produce to the forecast, then how would you make the forecast? So George, when you were at SIG, right, now a little different because you were on the training side. You had the training group and you had the store, I believe.
That's correct. Yeah, we had two separate operations out there.
How did you get intel to create a forecast for training? We're not talking about, products. This is now service. How did you get some input to know what the forecast for training would be, or the forecast for the store would be?
Well, two different things. And for the straight training, we would ask our customers. People would come to a class, and we have an evaluation sheet at the end of the class, and we'd have a questionnaire as to what types of training, whether rifle, pistol, shotgun, personal defense, whatever. We had a long list of things that we would poll and tally and put together. The other part of that is we were also product support, for the sales folks. So they actually would give us input as far as where we needed to do schools and when and with who. And so we had a kind of a two-pronged approach there. The sales people literally drove one side of that, and then we drove the other side of it. From the pro shop standpoint, we gleaned information from a lot of different folks. We made the decision to sell other than SIG products in the pro shop, and therefore the accessories and other things that we wanted to stock, we polled from the people in the classes again. What would you like for us to stock? In ammunition and magazines and flashlights, loading devices, all these types of things. So the bottom line is in every case, in a roundabout way, we were customer demand driven. And we worked really hard, with the customer service end of things, with the sales end of things, and with direct contact with the students to drive what we stocked, what we taught, what we did, and how we made the best profit, best bang for a buck, if you will.
So you took that information, you talked to your customer, and using that, you decided and defined training classes and or products for the store. I mean, oversimplify that, right?
Yeah. But it was all customer driven.
So did you have to change that throughout the year? Because, what they were starting to say they wanted in November, December, when it was cold out up here in New Hampshire, changed around April and May when it got a little warmer, or different events went on? I mean, I assume you didn't lock in.
A lot of that stuff was fixed coming from the sales folks. It really didn't make much difference one way or the other, what time of year it was. On the other end of things, we would vary with what I would say the political climate or the crime climate in the country. One of the things that wasn't popular but became popular was active shooter training.
Right.
What do you do? An active shooter response for the civilian, and of course, we'd gotten out of the law enforcement military exclusively and gone into the responsible citizen end of things. And so there were a number of things that were socially driven in this country. And of course, we paid attention to that. We got ahead of the curve, and I expect we were one of the first organizations that provided that type training.
Great. So the point of this here is you need to get input from your customer. You need to get that. Typically, sales and marketing will do that. But there's also other pieces that need to be included. We'll also look at, we'll look at the history of NICS, adjusted NICS. You may get direct input from your bigger customers, your bigger customers. And then add a piece of, what you think. You get the marketing piece. Don't forget the product launch piece here, right? So now you're going to do some new product launching new product launching. How's that for words? And marketing.
Let me throw one other thing in that I think it's important for a manufacturer to do, and was important for us to do too. Sometimes we'd sit down, we'd brainstorm, and we'd think about something new and innovative that we thought would be popular. As an example, we put together a scopes class. Didn't do anything, no shooting, no nothing, but we kind of did an internal poll, and we found out that most of the people that buy a scope to put on a rifle or a pistol or a shotgun or whatever, they know how to turn the power up and down, but they got no idea how to adjust the ocular or the objective. They don't know how to test the scope to see whether the clicks mean anything or not. And that, just scopes, that's what we called it.
Yep.
And that class took off, and they fill it today. They fill that class every time it's offered. So that was just one of those things.
Right.
Well, we got customer.
Sorry. Well, so because I want to move on to here, right? So we get the customer input. We're going to build a sales forecast, match it up with production schedule. But again, let's get back to the strategy piece. Make sure the goals are aligned. So we're starting to get into how do you do this? If the goals aren't aligned, okay, if sales is only focused on sales dollars, not alone sales margin, and don't have a fill rate necessarily in there, or a cost or a profit of the business, well, heck, core sales is going to say, I don't care how much inventory you have, I want it all there. And then operations has a competing objective. So these are some of the things you start peeling this away, peeling this through, you got to get into. But you put the plan together, then you need to build some schedule. This is actually a live schedule that shows over 4-week period where you're gathering data here in the week 1, Monday of week 1, down to Friday of week 4, you have the meeting. And we're definitely I guess a ready, fire, aim type approach consulting firm. You don't have to get this thing all dotted I's and crossed T's. Let's get started and have some meetings. Let's start making decisions. We've got a sales forecast. We've got an operations plan. We got the finance. We got the strategy. It's not working. What if we increase production? What if we reduce that forecast? Why would we reduce the forecast? What if we borrow some money to make more? Could we sell more? Okay, what if we change those service levels? Maybe they're not right. Geez, what if we do nothing? Okay, and that's honestly, I think, the biggest.
A lot of flat squirrels. There are a lot of flat squirrels in the road that couldn't make a decision or did nothing.
It's a good way to put it. But what we're kind of driving at is trying to just start the process. I mean, agree upon organizationally, culturally, align the goals, but now start getting into making decisions and meeting, and then measure, your progress. What is it that you're trying to accomplish from a goal perspective, and measure it. I mean, this, complete order fill rate. I know organizations like to look at maybe line item fill rate, not complete order fill rate. But look at your forecast accuracy. Look at your cost per unit. Is your inventory going down? Your turns going up? Your lead times should be decreasing. Customer satisfaction should be going up. These are some of the things that you should be measuring now anyways. The question is, are they getting better? So let me take all this and put it into a case study, give you a little example. And I'm going to do it outside of the industry because it's actually more complex. So we worked with a company that made cranberries. They did the raw cranberries and they did sweet and dried cranberries, SDCs. Now, why is this different? Well, imagine having a fixed inventory, fixed product for the year. Couldn't get it anymore, and that's all you got. And you had to sell it all out, because if you didn't sell it all out, it went bad. You also had production constraints, so the plant could only make X. And basically what happens in this industry is you've got growers. The growers sell the cranberries to the producer sells it to the consumer or other OEMs. And so you have to figure out, so this is a crop, right? You got to figure out, or guess, another word, how many bushels, barrels of cranberry are you going to get that year? It's not like you can go out and necessarily buy it. A whole side story of how the contracts work. And so you basically have a limited inventory, and you have customers just like you do. There's some that buy high volume, some that are mid-level OEMs, and then what I'll call the consumers and spot. And so what was happening in this business, the situation here was that you had a lot of excess inventory, a lot of excess cranberries in the market, which was driving down prices. That therefore made for some internal fights within the organization. It also started impacting profits, and customers weren't happy at the same time because they actually weren't getting necessarily what they wanted when they wanted, because they wanted more. So we instituted and built a sales and operations planning process. It took us a good year cycle to make this work. So the business cycle was 1 year. They got the inventory cranberries in October, November. That's when they found out what they were going to have for the year, and then they had to make it work for the following 12, 13 months. So we put a team together. First thing we did, put a team together. We had a VP of domestic sales, a VP of international sales, marketing director who was new product development, plant manager, CFO, and a sales leader, which was me. I was asked to be kind of the interim head of sales and negotiate, if you will, or barter this process. And so we got the team together, and the first thing that we tried to do was get them on the same page as to what are we trying to accomplish? What are the goals? We're all struggling here, we're all fighting, or somewhat. How do we work together to be more successful? And that success means profit for the business. One of the things that we did early on was change some of the compensation, the incentive compensation for the salespeople, because it was all driven towards sales, and it wasn't anything related to the company profitability. And by changing that company profitability, we now got some buy-in from sales. Same thing on the operations side. It wasn't just operational costs. We actually drew some sales incentives for them. So now we had some mutually beneficial incentives across the team. And then we did what you would typically do. We're going to go build a sales forecast. Okay, we built it by customer, by region, by product family, and the numbers you see there, which you would like to think might be dollars, that's nice, it's actually pounds of cranberry. And we got input from our customer. We asked a lot of the high volume customers, what do you think what are you going to need for volume and what type? You can see if you get a little insight on cranberry, you've got regular cranberries, you got glycerated, you got omega, you got whole, low moisture, diced julienne. You're starting to get into whole this, and so you have to start slicing this down. In fact, we looked at that and took the volume we were looking at and did an allocation. So now internally, based on that customer input, we said, okay, how are we going to allocate this volume for, I'll say, the small spot customers, which, by the way, they're the ones that makes all the money because you can charge a much higher price. What about the medium customers and then the large? Now, the large ones, you can see 51% of the volume was really going these large. They, absorbed a lot of the overhead. They paid for a lot of things. You don't make necessarily great money on them, if at all, but it does absorb a lot of overhead. And the challenge here is that mix, because you can't sell too much to the large because you don't make a lot of money. And then you can also see on the right side, we divvied it up, if you will, by geography, and we did it by category, type of cranberry that we thought we were going to get. Now, again, this had to get adjusted in October, November, when we got the actual inventory. The key here was that we got the team on the same page to agree upon how we're going to allocate the product by category, by geography. We actually peeled this back by customer. We said, here's the top volume customers at 51%. We put some pricing into that to figure out if we sold it to them at that price, and we got that volume, and did the same thing for an average selling price for the medium and the small. What would that turn into from a financial perspective, where finance came into play to figure out, are we going to make money? So there was a great discussion, great debate. I could probably say some battles here and there, but we ended up executing this plan actually quite well, mostly well at the end of year one. I won't say this was perfect, but at the end of year one, we had built a team that was focused on the process, that was on the same page. And honestly, that was kind of my goal for year one. This was probably going to be a 2-year project. Year one was to get the process working, but get the team on the same page to agree upon how this is going to work. In fact, it worked out so well. We had the VP of International, when prices started decreasing, dropping internationally and they were still strong in the United States, he said, hey, why don't you take some of my volume and put it more into the U.S. and sell it more in the U.S. because we can make more money that way. Now, that impacted his bonus because he had a bonus linked on sales. But he saw the big picture, and that to me was some of the big wins. The accuracy of our forecast went up, customer satisfaction went up. We actually sold more of the spot customers, okay, 11% more, which is where we're making more money. And that actually offset the fact that the average sale price per pound dropped by 9%. But because that spot went up, we actually made more money for the year. So the point here, this is a real quick example, is that we took a team, we aligned their goals, we aligned the culture, if you will. We put a process in place. We met on a monthly basis. We met weekly, building up to the monthly meeting. And we got to a point where it worked very well. And at the end of the year, you know, we didn't have any leftover inventory and we weren't short. Let's say it was close. It wasn't perfect, but it was close. But the year after, it got better. And that's kind of the point when we get into this, is we're trying to make a process that will get better year over year. And in our industry, you know, we can do that. We know Q4 and Q1 are typically going to be stronger demand. The summer months like now are going to be slowed down. But as you start peeling that back by SKU, how does it look? Okay, so think of it as a process that might take a few years to be extremely successful, but you saw the benefits you're going to get when you're done. So how do you do this? What are the keys to making this successful? Well, again, we found, we call it the 12 best practices of sales and operations planning. And they're categorized by organization, process, and then tools and data. And we're going to start with the organizational piece because that's honestly what's more important, getting that cross-functional participation in the planning process. You need a champion. You need somebody that's going to take this and own this. And it has to be someone senior enough to facilitate, if not overcome, some functional or roadblocks along the way. Obviously, targets, goals with accountability in place, link it to the incentive plan, if you have an incentive plan, and then discipline. Again, working with an organization right now that has a pretty good sales and operations plan, but it's not going as well, and they basically say, because we're not following, our discipline's not that strong. And so they know what they need to work on, and that's going to be a focus. After the organizational piece gets in, then you get the process. Okay, not that this is easy, but define the process. What's the plan? What's it going to look like? You know, they say an 18-month, I'd use an 18-month rolling plan. And then tools. It's very helpful when we were doing the Cranberry project here to be able to see historical supply and demand. Because again, we're trying to predict, talk about, you know, predicting the future, you know, firearm orders, predict what the crop of cranberries is going to look like. That's not that easy. But when you get into some statistical tools and analytical tools, which actually weren't that expensive to use, it was very, very helpful for us to understand and identify what the future would look like. And also talking to some of the growers who were with a customer to understand what were they, what was their mix going to look like. So the best practices will get into organization, it'll get into the process, and it will get into tools. So how are we doing for time, George? I got quarter of. We're looking good.
Quarter of. We got a little bit, and
good. So we can,
if
people have
questions coming too.
More questions, we've got a few in there. If we got others,
yep.
Feel free to ask them, and we'll answer them the best we can before we're done with time. But now the question was, okay, how do you do this? So most of the people, George, as we saw, this is new to them. So I will give them the map. Here's the map, how to get started. Now, I want to look at the bottom of this, because let's start with communication and change management. Talking about a cultural shift. This isn't just, hey, sales and operations, you guys got to work together, finance, make sure it works out. It's a kind of a cultural shift. And so you need to start talking about the communication of this and expectation setting and getting into the goals and aligning the goals. Again, if the sales team goals are purely on sales dollars or units, you're going to have trouble. If operations goals is purely on cost per unit or inventory levels, lower the better, you're going to have challenges. So that's why I like this, where you talk about communication change starting on the bottom, but then it's a phased approach. And you have an integrated planning assessment. So assess, what do you have in place today? What are the fundamentals that you're not doing, like fill rates or service levels? And just a basic sales forecast. If the sales forecast currently is not being adhered to, let's start with that before you get into something bigger. And so there's a phase one of basically preparing to do this, you know, designing the process, doing some training, doing a lot of education. Phase two gets into these pilot programs. Let's start piloting it. This is going to take, I would think you're probably going to look at it 3 years to make this really, really work. Okay, we do have a 1-year cycle in our business typically. So 3 iterations, you should be doing pretty well. So you got to look out this 3-year type time frame, if you will, and start doing some iterative procedures, building the sales plan, building the operational plan, linking that to the financial plan and the strategic plan. And then you're into kind of phase 3, which is this continuous improvement effort. It's going to take a while, but, and I'd probably say if you're going to get started, you do need that champion. And who is it that's going to champion this? And will the organization take a long-term view at this? Or will they do something where, oh, another active shooter incident comes along, let's just start cranking stuff out and throw the process aside? That's the question that we think you're going to be challenged with. So, in fact, what I'd probably like to do right now is ask a question. Let's ask a poll. Poll number 2 is going to be, what will be your biggest challenge in implementing or improving your sales and operations process? So last poll, second poll, if you'd click to say, what is it going to be committing and making the plan? Is it actually going to be designing the plan? Is it going to be that cultural component and getting someone on the team to buy in? Do you need the expertise and experience to do this? Is something new? You got to go out and get educated. There's the whole goal play, changing our incentive plan. Geez, my God, we can't change the incentive plan. Why would we do that? Guess might help people get aligned. How's that? So let's do take a look at that. We've got 60% voted, so a couple more seconds here. And then, George, you want to take a guess? I'm going to do a guess for George. What do you think is going to be the biggest challenge here? Can you see? Committing, designing it, culture, incentives, expertise?
I think committing is going to be the big deal.
It is. You think it is? I mean, at least that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, okay. I think committing. The bottom line is, if I wait long
enough, I think it's going in that direction. If I wait long enough, they'll probably
wait a little longer. I like being right. I'd like all the audience to hit committing real quick. You know, any of those that haven't voted yet, or you can change your vote while we're right in.
George is paying $5 for every committing vote here. Okay,
yeah, there we
close
go.
It up.
There we go.
Now here's what's interesting, George. I'll share it with you, and you can tell me your reaction when you see it.
Okay. All right.
So you are in the top, and so it started off changing the incentive plan was what started having the higher percentage. Expertise then followed, and actually committing was third, and then it started creeping up at the end. And I waited long enough for you.
All the listeners for your support.
But we've got a mix of challenges, right? You know, changing the incentive plan, having some expertise, and committing. And committing is the challenge, which, you know, they're all kind of interrelated, right? Because if you change the incentive plan, you'll probably get more commitment. You need a leader, a champion, you know, in the organization, ideally the president, owner, CEO, to change the incentive plan, okay, which gets you more commitment.
Well, you know, let me. I think we got a moment or two. Let me speak to that just for a second. I'm really surprised that we had such a low percentage on the cultural leadership and the champion. You know, internally, we have something called internal inertia. We want to do the same thing, and nobody wants to rock the boat, even at the top in a lot of cases. And sometimes you've got to have an outside person. It may not be us. It may be somebody else, but somebody that's got some expertise in the field to guide and direct. And I'll use well, let's use SIG since I'm familiar with that. You know, Max Michel came along, world champion shooter, so on and so forth. And you know, a lot of the guns that they put together, most of the folks over there didn't have a clue as to what needed to be done. So Max says, okay, we got to do this, we got to do this, we got to do this, and you know, they had sales people and operations people get together and figure out how they were going to produce this particular thing. Now, that's a narrow segment of the market, and it could be broader in any number of directions, but that's just an example of bringing somebody in from the outside that had absolute acute understanding of what needed to be produced, rather than somebody just, oh, we're going to make a competition gun and throw some sights on it and paint it red and send it out the door, which has been done in recent history. Anyhow, another story.
Let's get. I've got basically one slide to wrap up, so let's go to some questions. Let me dig this up here for a second. Ironically, one of the questions is, who should be the champion? I'd say me, but probably. I mean, if you can, depending on the size of the organization, this is one part of it. We've got different sizes listening in here today. In the small or mid-sized organization, you know, the president CEO could facilitate this and be the champion. Maybe not do all the detailed work, but facilitate, because what you need is someone to say, this is important. We're going to do this. I'm going to align the goals. I'm going to make this work. So that to me is where the president comes in. Get a little larger, you might get into a general manager. I'm looking always for someone that has some authority over sales and operations, both sides of that. So a general manager or COO, if some of the COOs drive or own sales. They don't need to. There just has to be an agreement, an alignment that we're all going to work together and make this happen. And again, if you cannot change the incentives, as we saw here, changing that incentive plan, then you're going to have a hard time getting buy-in. I know we did the Cranberry Company and a few others. That's where I started because I knew that was going to be a roadblock. And my first discussion before we even took any projects was, can I see the incentive plan and can I change it? Even midway through the year. Okay. Again, if it's done correctly and for the better, there shouldn't be any necessarily pushback, and there usually isn't. And again, I don't go from where the plan is today where I want it to be tomorrow. Actually, we'll build it over a 3-year program, phase it over years. Okay, so it doesn't go from A to Z. We're going from A to L to M and so forth and so on. So that's who I think would be the best person to lead this, to be a champion. Another question I have here is back to forecasting. How do you create a good sales forecast? We kind of hit that a little earlier about input. Here's two examples that we've worked with in the past. First of all, creating a good sales forecast takes time and it takes buy-in, but it takes learning. Too often people are at the 40,000, 50,000 foot level and their sales creates a plan and doesn't work and everyone throws whatever on it and says, well, that was dumb. Well, it wasn't dumb. It was the assumptions that they had behind it that drove it. No, by the way, everyone in the organization and the leadership team is responsible for that sales plan, not just sales. So if others here listening, operations, doesn't push back on that, you're as guilty as they are on why it might have been off. But let's learn from that. Let's learn to see, well, what did we assume was incorrect? Geez, we assumed that there would be a Democrat in the White House. Okay, we all got caught on that one. All right. What else have we been assuming that's wrong? And then how do we get better at making better assumptions, which drives better sales forecast? We actually had a client that we worked with, and after a year or so, we got to the point where the sales forecast was only 46% accurate. And it got to a point where we said, you know what? We can't do it. We can't work off 46%. And for a lot of different reasons, we couldn't get it accurate. Therefore, we changed the operating model not to be necessarily sales forecast driven, but more operational reactive, operationally flexible. We had, let's say a 50% forecast was going to drive some of the core products, but we had to have 50% of the business, the operating model being flexible to deal with the inability to forecast. So a couple answers there. There's a couple more questions, but I see we're getting close to time. So we're going to wrap up. Summary. Sales and operation planning, you can save money, you can make money in sales and operations planning if you follow it. If you build the culture, if you build that philosophy, if you get the alignment, it can bring money, revenues, and cost reduction. It does take that champion and that leader to make it happen. And, not to give up on that, that's what I'd push on. For organizations that are leading what's called operational excellence, I think we had some articles on operational excellence, customer intimacy, and product leadership. This is a must-use tool. If you're driving operational excellence, which is many listening here, by the way, I know we've got a lot of branded product companies, but we've got also some distributors, and I think you are driven operationally, not necessarily from a product leadership perspective. You have to use this. This is going to make your life so much easier. And then there's that champion. So identify who that champion is. That's the starting point. Leverage some of this. I'd say, I think, George, you were saying also, right? If you don't know how to do this, go ask for help. Ask other peers, ask other consultants. There's our selfish plug. But
ask for somebody with some experience in the field.
It's no different than, our listeners. I mean, they want to shoot better. They want to play golf better. They're going to go to a coach. They're going to go to someone that knows how to do this, or they're going to read a lot of books and take a while. So, ask for help. Do that assessment. Figure out where you think your bigger needs are. If you do want to connect with us, you can reach out to us. We'll answer some questions. We'll see if we're a good fit for what you do. We'll give you a little assessment of where you're at and what's needed. I think the big key, though, I want to emphasize is, this is going to take time. This isn't just doing something simple and easy. It's going to take some time, but if you commit to it, there are some great, great, great benefits out there. So I hope everyone enjoyed this, got some education. I'd like to thank Kenyon, NASGW for hosting and sponsoring this. And those listening, we'll see you. Where's George? You know where the meeting is? NASGW is going to be this year. I know we're somewhere. Wherever it's going to be, we'll be there if anyone wants to meet with us. So that's it. Everyone have a great day, have a great week, and a great summer.
We'll talk to you in about 6 weeks with our next webinar.
There we go. Take care.